Hey, everybody, welcome to Love and Reload, the voice of the relocation industry. I am your host, Ben Cross. I'm so blessed and honored to be here today with Ken Nickel Lane, the managing director of Nickel Lane Immigration, and our friend to the north today on this day after Canadian Election Day. Ken, how are you doing? How are you feeling today?
Ben, I am feeling mildly hungover but happy. Thank you very much.
I think those two things go together, to be honest with you, Leave it all in the field. That's what we say.
Yeah, it was pretty funny, driving. I go to the gym very early in the morning each day, and I managed to drag myself out to it today, and the roads were very quiet. I think there were a fair few Canadians that were in a similar boat to myself.
They just, yeah, they really. So did you have to stay up late last night watching the results come in? Was it one of those nail biters? I mean, how does it work there up in Canada?
Yeah, well, I think, I'm not sure how it is in the US, right? So this is where it's going to be a bit interesting because I don't know enough about your system to be, uh, really intelligent in terms of my comments, but certainly I can
Nobody
speak to
expects
ours.
intelligence on this program, Ken. I got to tell you right now, it's a
Yeah,
local.
and perhaps the same with your politics, but I digress. No, but here, we tend to get results really fast. The challenge we had was that there was a lot of advanced polls, and we also had a lot of mail-ins, right? So that slowed things. I mean, normally you'd get something declared pretty quickly, and we did actually have Carney noted as being elected as the prime minister relatively early. But then the issue is really about all the individual polls, right? Like who and which riding took what were the changes, what were the dynamics. And I think we're still sitting today not clear if it's a minority government or if it's a majority, which is a
Tell me
fairly
the
big.
difference here for those of us not
Yeah.
familiar.
Okay, so you need to get past 172 to have a majority. And a majority means you can pass bills without anything from any support from other parties. So this is a core distinction, right? Is that you guys are a two-party system. We're a multiple party. Fundamentally,
Yep.
there's two main parties, right? There's the Conservatives and the Liberals, but there's also the NDP. There's the Bloc, and there's a couple of smaller parties like the Greens and the PPC. So what you try to avoid is you're always looking for majorities, so you don't have to rely on support from one of the other parties to pass something through the House, right? You want to be
Okay.
able to just push it through yourself, run your own agenda, and that's really the goal. So what was interesting about this whole scenario is that before Christmas the Conservatives were running at basically landslide territory. They were
Yeah, I
like
heard they were up like
220 seats, and they just had to get past 172. So they were figuring they were just going to coast into this all pretty happy, right? Then guess what? Their core foil, Trudeau steps down, Carney steps in, and then your man steps in. And oh
So,
boy,
so, so let me ask you this, and
yeah,
get in the comments here. We're talking about the results of the Canadian election that happened, yesterday. The Prime Minister Mark Carney has been elected, and we're talking about, how are Canadians feeling about that? What's going on in Canadian politics? How is that going to impact the relations between the United States and Canada? How is that going to impact global mobility, immigration, all of the things that make the wheels turn for us? So get in the comments. I want to hear from you. Hit that like button as well.
hey Rick.
Let people know we're out there. We got people checking in here. We got London watching. Hey, Richard in London, how are you? How are you feeling over there in London about the Prime Minister in Canada? He's already started to look towards Europe. I know you guys aren't Europe anymore. Sorry, but
Yeah, that might change though, right?
look, it changes in the air.
Yeah.
I want to know. Get in the comments here, Richard. I want to know your thoughts. Rob Zeitz here from Wicked Smart, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Hey, Rob, get in here. Let me know what your
Hey
thoughts
Rob.
are. Rick, hey Ken, good to see you. Hi, Rick, and hello from Ecuador. So far we've got London, the U.S., and Ecuador watching right now. Get in the comments. Represent. Stefan Campan is saying a great guest to have in your show, Ben. Looking forward to hear the insights from Ken Nickel Lane. Rob Zeit says, yesterday night I understood what a riding is. It's interesting how little I was taught about the government of U.S. neighbors while in school. Yeah, super interesting.
Well, why don't we start there, right? Let's talk
Let's
a
do it.
little bit about the difference between the U.S. and Canada, right? So, fundamentally, you guys are a two-party system, and it's not just two-party, but from my understanding, people that vote Republican vote Republican. right?
Across
Like
the board, down the ballot. Yep.
right. No one, like, it's just, that's what I am. That's my belief structure. That's what my dad voted. That's what my grandfather voted.
And to be honest, we don't even know what the other people do. We know what the top people do, and then we
Yeah.
just assume everybody else does the same thing.
Okay. So in Canada, that's not the case. And I'm a prime example. So, I've been voting for over 40 years. Yes, I know. And most of that I voted conservative, right? So up until probably the back end of Harper's reign, which was 12 years ago, I was conservative, card carrying, same story, right? Just voted that way all the way along. But it's a very different conservative party. So in Canada, it's not strange for you to change gears, right? And in my case, I decided that the direction the Conservative Party started to trend to, which was, I'll just call it a harder right perspective, right? Some would call it populist. That really didn't align with my values. It was not progressive conservative. It was something else, right? And it really started to move in that direction. And that amplified, I think, under Poilievre. So during that time, I was voting whatever vote cast would give me the best outcome. It was strategic voting, right? So I'm looking for this kind of government. I'm looking for, yes, I know the Conservatives are going to get in, but I'd like to see, the Liberals to have a strong opposition, right?
So is that, when you say the best outcome for you, you mean personally, as a
Personally.
business owner, for your taxes? Like what? How do you determine that? Or how would you determine that as a voter?
Yeah, for me, it's personal. It's the taxes piece for the business. It's not as relevant in my estimation. I mean, yeah, there's certainly changes depending on who's in, but that's also who's leading the party as opposed to what the party is. Historically, conservatives have been just that, very similar to Republicans, right? Very, cut, restrain, etc. Although in the past they were also way more progressive, and they're not now. Liberals historically have been, more spend. The NDP have been very much, their language would be kitchen table instead of boardroom table, right? Really focus on the family values and all those sorts of things. And the NDP used to drive me nuts because that kind of rhetoric really would just seem so anti-business back in the day. But it got to the point with the shifting values in the parties that the NDP, at least here in Alberta, became very centrist. Not so much federally, but here they're certainly a lot calmer as a group. They're not quite as right. So it's not uncommon for people to vote differently. And at this point, I don't have a party, right? I voted ND in this particular election because the guy in my riding was good. He's good at what he does, and it would keep a seat away from the Conservatives. And I wanted to see Carney win, not the Conservatives. So
talk to us about riding. What that is?
Yeah. It's your voting area, right? It's where you sit.
Your
so
district
you vote.
or something.
Sure. Yeah. Same language, right? But in Canada, we just got what's our riding, right? So, I go and vote for my riding, and I've got a list of 7 candidates, including some strange guys at the bottom that are completely random, and then I have the major parties. Right, so you tick the box for whoever you want, and off you go. And sometimes there may be additional questions, like sort of referendum-related things, but this is really just about the candidate.
Yeah, super interesting. Get in the comments here. We got a lot of questions coming in. Comments.
Sure.
Hit that like button, y'all. Let us know what your thoughts are here, what questions you have. We've got some comments here. I want to just kind of hear your. We always like to prioritize the comments from
Sure.
the folks who take the time to watch it. Jack's up north. He says it's a good decision. Trump has 4 years and pissed off the entire world. Canada can step in with the same products at better pricing with a currently weaker dollar, filling the void that Trump left. Huh. Do you see that the Canadians, gosh, I don't know what the word is, but the presence, the significance, the power, perhaps even economically and as a trade partner goes up now based on what Carney's doing and then what Trump is also doing simultaneously?
It's a very loaded question. Let me start with the fact that, do you know who Jean Chrétien is? He was one of our prime ministers years back.
No.
Very, very, very popular. Guy's 91 now, and he's still very active, and he's liberal, and he was supporting Carney. He made the comment that Trump should be awarded the Order of Canada, and he was proposing that. And then then he said, "Oh, but wait, we can't have a convicted felon as the Order of Canada." I'm sorry, but he was saying that because really Trump had united Canada, right? So there's a very strong undercurrent of that here, and both parties really laid into that pretty strongly. I think, Carney perhaps did a bit better of a job of that. But regardless, it's the outcome. And are we positioned to do more for ourselves? I would say yes. And I would say that Carney, because of who he is probably very well positioned to help take us in a very different direction where we're less entangled and dependent on the US for trade, right? Particularly with the UK and the EU. And that's a very clear focus. And, even while he was, I'll just call it interim PM before the election, he was clearly making very strong moves that way in Europe, meeting with Macron, et cetera. So I do think that there is strong opportunity for us elsewhere globally, particularly with our oil and gas. I mean, right now, you guys are gobbling up 65, 70% of our oil and gas exports, right? And all we really need is a pipeline that will connect us to deep water ports, either end of the country, so east-west, or up north, and it goes to other markets, right? And the other thing too is Trump always harps about the fact that he's, America is subsidizing Canada. Well, actually, frankly, we're subsidizing you because our oil is heavily discounted, right? So if we now start selling it, more broadly, that changes, we do better, et cetera, right? And it's not just the oil and gas, it's everything else. So.
Wow. Super interesting. Yeah, I think it seems like, based on that, you just said, all you need is a deep water port. Well, if I'm hearing that, I'm thinking, okay, port investment. Right. So if I'm a port builder, whatever the heck that looks like, I'm looking at, is it Vancouver? Is it, somewhere out in New Brunswick or so? I don't know what. Right. But I'm like, okay, how do I go and invest in building those deep water ports out there? Super interesting. Speaking of ports, we got Farrell Elliott checking in from Long Beach, California. Love Canada. And I got to echo Farrell here too and just say, Ken, we love you guys. I know we don't always act like it. I know it's a little bit of a toxic relationship right now where it's love, hate, and like we wake up, we have a bender one night and then we wake up the next morning. We didn't really mean that, but I just want to say on behalf of all of us sober Americans today, we do love y'all. And
but I think that's a core distinction, right? So what Canadians have a problem with is not with Americans. Far from it. Canadians have a real problem with your administration, right? And you can sense the support from across America to Canada. It's hilarious. We were in Jasper, one of our mountain parks, and we were having dinner one night, and the server was talking to us about, the Americans have been coming up as tourists. They were afraid to say where they're from, right? And on a regular basis, I get people in my network saying, Ken, I'm an American citizen. Is it okay if we come? Like, is it going to be a problem? No, it's not going to be a problem. Just don't wear your red hat. You're going to be good. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking about that this summer. Right? I'm thinking about going to Europe with my wife. And I'm thinking about putting like a Canadian flag on my backpack or something.
You can buy kits. You can buy entire kits for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We don't have to go through the full immigration process. We can just pretend.
No. You can just buy the package.
Now Richard here from London says, "Hey, I see the rebirth of the Commonwealth." Oh, don't start too soon.
Yeah, we kind of struggle with Charles. I got to say, the Queen. Charles.
I hear that. Let's see. We got another question here. Robert Zeit says, talking about different government systems, do relocating employees get training about the political system of the countries they're going to? Seems like it would be helpful to know.
Yeah, and honestly, we don't see any of that. I mean, we are strictly immigration, right? And most of the folks that we're bringing in we're bringing folks in from all over the world, but we tend to bring in probably about 70% of our people are temporary foreign workers that are coming in from the U.S. and they don't get much in the way of training, but really it's a pretty easy adjustment, right? And if you're coming in for project work, you're not voting, you're not really concerned about all the rest of it. It's really just about, okay, well, how does this work? How do I, get my utilities set up and all the rest of it? So
hit that like button, get in the comments here. I want to hear what your thoughts are. We've got another comment here, question from Rick. Get in the comments, y'all. Want to hear from you. Rick says, what are your feelings, or better yet, projected outlook as to what U.S. immigration to Canada from the USA looks like? And Ken, I think your mic is hitting your shirt a little bit or something.
Fair enough.
Just heads up on that. But Rick says, what's the projected outlook on U.S. immigration to Canada?
Well, it depends on how you define that. So, we typically talk about immigration to Canada either as permanent residents or NPRs, right? NPRs being temporary foreign workers, students, and similar. what we're seeing is we're seeing a fairly significant increase in movement from the U.S. into Canada, and it's in both categories. So, we're fielding requests from individuals that are looking at Canada as we kind of joke it's Plan A, EH, but it's instead of being in the U.S. looking for a place to be instead. So it's a CEO that may be currently based in Houston, and they have business in Canada. He's moving his head of operations, or himself at least, and his family into Canada. Right, that's pretty common for us right now, and we're also getting folks that have got disabled children they're concerned about. Maybe their kids are LGBTQ plus or similar, and they're also concerned. So we're seeing a lot of that on the PR side. And then what we're also seeing is we're seeing a lot of activity coming in just from our corporate clients, right? There's a lot of project work going on here, and they're just seeing, an ongoing increase. At your point about the ports, realistically, with all the things that Carney is promising, there's no way we've got enough people here to build all the things he's talking about. We have to bring people in, right? So immigration levels here won't change in my mind. And certainly when he was talking about the immigration portfolio, it's pretty much status quo, but he's got a lot of things he's got to fix too, because things really fell apart under Trudeau.
Well, and I was going to ask you that. I mean, we look at over the last, 5 years, there was a point, correct me if I'm wrong here, because this is more your wheelhouse than mine,
Yeah.
but there was a point where Canada eclipsed the United States as the #1 destination for a year or two, I thought, for foreign workers. Do you see that happening again?
Well, that's difficult just because of the sheer size of the economy, right? So, I mean, the U.S. economy is 10 times the size of Canada, but your current administration seems to be doing everything in its power to make the U.S. less attractive.
We feel like we're hurtling towards negative immigration right now. That's what it feels
Well,
like.
and on that, the likelihood that I'm going to set foot in the U.S. in the next 4 years is pretty much zero. In fact,
Well, we've talked about that, right?
Yeah.
We kind of debated that openly on your feed, right? It's like
Yeah.
we want you guys here, and y'all don't feel welcome, and you want to vote with your dollars, and I totally get that, and it worries me a little bit because I hate to see walls go up, and I know we started it, but
Well,
it
you
worries
have
me.
two issues though, right? Because on the one hand, you've got the boycott U.S. or anything American made, right? Don't spend your tourist dollars there. Spend them in Mexico. They're also under attack. Spend them in Europe. Spend them in Canada, right? You can go to Vancouver Island and hang out there for the summer. But the other part of it is, frankly, fear, because what we're seeing happening with people crossing into the U.S. and being detained, and unreasonably detained and being disappeared to El Salvador. I'm literally the first guy that if they check my social media, I'm on a plane, right?
Yeah.
So there's no way of even transiting through.
Well,
So
that's
it's a
fair.
double dimension, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you could come over here on a student visa and they check your socials and you're going to El Salvador.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people are having issues with this. Even people on the right are coming out and say, listen, there's no due process around this stuff. There's no rhyme or reason.
None.
This is new policy being made up, while you're boarding the plane to El Salvador. And they're just, and there's no vetting of this stuff. So it scares everyone, right? And if today it's gang members of this type, what's to say, the next administration doesn't say you're a gang member of the other type, and all of a sudden everyone's a gang member, and everybody's just getting KGB'd and Gestapo'd left and right and sent off to God knows where with no human rights. I mean, it's a very slippery slope, and I don't blame anyone. I mean, we're not as scared as as U.S. born people here. Maybe we should be more scared. It still, to some degree, feels like an other person's problem right now.
I know,
We
but
know it's such a slippery,
where does it all?
slope.
Where does it start, right? Like, and you look at any
Well,
country
it
around the
started.
globe and any place in history, and it starts this way, and it goes down a path. So, and not far be it for me to preach to you guys because, it's your world. But, from afar, this looks very much like situations that have played out through history.
And
So,
authoritarian governments everywhere, yeah.
yeah, pretty much, which is something that we avoided, thankfully.
Yeah, we got people checking in here. I want to
All
just
right.
make sure everybody's taken care of. We got Jillian Guzda in Texas, excited to learn today. What's up, Jillian? Any questions, let us know. I want to get to the heart of Rick's questions, though. Just give me a quick answer here. I mean, is Canadian inbound immigration, let's forget about U.S., coming from the U.S., what are you projecting for the next 12 months, 18 months? I mean, over the last 12, 18 months, percentage-wise, would you just hazard a guess?
I don't think you're going to see a significant change in maybe the next quarter. I think you'll see the NPRs starting to drive up over the course of the back end of the year. The prime minister has said that he's going to retain the current levels plan in its current guise. So there is a slow rise for the PRs over the next couple of years. So I don't think you're going to see a massive change, but that will also change. And this is another thing that's quite different about the US and Canada is that you guys kind of look at your immigration system, even through my imperfect lens, as being quite inflexible. I mean, your current administration, well, they can to change that perception by changing things pretty randomly. But the structure of your system is very regimented, right? It takes a lot to move the dial on it. Here in Canada, it's very different. I describe it as flexible to a fault. So every year, the prime minister says to his immigration minister, I want a new levels plan, and I want you to address that and give us a plan for the future. But through the year, the minister has wide sweeping powers to be able to enact program changes and make moves, right? So, you guys have a rather charming acronym FAFO. Well, that's kind of how Canadian immigration develops, because our minister has the ability to run 3-year pilot programs and uses them extensively. So remember, I think was it last year or the year before we did that H-1B program? Do you remember that when hey, if you got an H-1B and it's expiring, come on to Canada, we'll take you all.
Yeah.
And we brought in like 10,000 people, or at least we gave work permits to 10,000 people. And the question is how many actually came in. But that was a pretty random program that was very opportunistic. And that's one thing I think you're really going to see from Carney's government is when we talked about talent, he's going to be working that angle pretty hard, because a lot of folks are looking for, a pass out of jail and looking for Canada as an out from the US, and he's going to do what he can to bring them in. And Ben, you're on mute.
No, I know. I was trying to do a talk to time. I'm trying
Fair
to do
enough.
8 things over here, helping to produce and everything while listening to you and putting a comment. Look, I put a little comment in here. I said questions for Ken. Throw them in the comments here.
Very nice.
Yeah, people are saying this reminds me of Germany in 1926 or 1933.
Poland, yeah.
Yeah, it's tyrannical in nature. People are saying that you're recommending burner phones.
Well, but that's actually, it's funny because that's a debate, and I was reading something from an immigration lawyer I know who shall remain nameless, but his recommendation was not, right. There's a question of whether you should use a burner phone. Like foreign governments are recommending you bring in your burner phones, but
Is that
that's
so?
also a flag.
Why would you bring in a burner? What's the rationale behind it?
Because that way they can't look at your social media.
So if they detain you and they take your phone from you and they
don't even have to detain you. They just got to ask. They have the right, right? They have the right to examine your social media and demand it on the spot.
So you almost need burner accounts.
But if you bring the phone in, now you're a suspect, right? You got a burner phone. There's nothing on it. So you're kind of damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yeah,
right.
For
sure. I think that was the UK that actually set that policy up for anybody from the government that's traveling to the US. It was automatic. You're getting a burner.
Johanna Leonardson says hello from Stockholm.
Hey, Johanna.
Sweden's in the house.
See you next week.
Oh, yeah. Tell everybody real quick what's going on next week.
Europe, Zagreb. We're all going to Croatia, brother.
I want to go. I'm not going.
You should go, but except you can't. It's probably filled.
Yeah. No, they fill up fast at Euro.
They do.
Yeah. Let's see here. Shout out to all the people going to Euro there.
Hey, Jack.
Jack
Roman.
Jim. Look at Roman's in the house too.
You
guys are awesome. What's up,
Band
Roman?
boys.
I love what Roman does. On a side note here, he does these comedy shows at Ayla.
The improvs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's phenomenal stuff. I love that he does something that's so offbeat and yet so on. He did an improv thing for us at the LOVE+RELO 500 a couple years ago, and it was just a smash hit. Shout out to Roman. He's doing one in Denver coming up.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Good stuff's happening down here in the States. I know it doesn't seem like it, but there's stuff down here. Let's see. We got people checking in here. I want to make sure we kind of
comment from Jackson too on the snowbirds that are exiting out of the U.S. too, right?
What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's funny because there's a fair number of people in my circuit that have secondary properties in the U.S. and that would spend time there, and literally every single one of them is selling, and
Wow.
they're out, right, and looking for other places to put their money, and they're just not comfortable anymore. And another comment I had from somebody that was, I think they were down, their family was down in California, maybe in San Diego or something, for an extended holiday, and they said they just found, as Canadians, they found it very, very strange just how people were interacting, because people were really cautious about the comments when they found you're Canadian, and didn't know kind of how sympathetic you were to what was happening there, right? So just a very different feeling in the U.S. from the Canadians I talked to that are going down.
Do people in Canada assume that the Americans are kind of all kind of supportive and feel this way? I mean, this "Make America Great Again" vibe. I mean, do people assume that we're all
Kind of
kind
the
of?
opposite.
Oh,
I think
really?
I
Okay.
think there's enough of an understanding that what proportion of the population actually voted for the current administration? Was it like 30% or 29%?
Well, if you look at the total there's the total population, and there's the total eligible voter population.
Right.
Um, I mean, it was pretty high. Samara, why don't you put that in there? Super producer Samara, why don't you find out what percentage of the total United States population that's eligible to vote voted
I think
for
it was
Trump?
29%.
I like it. I like the sound of it. I'm not sure if it's.
Yeah, well, I thought it was like a third and a third and a third, right?
We're gonna see. Let's assume it is for a minute. What's your what was your point in that?
Well, I think that enough Canadians understand that. There's sort of two elements to it, right? So I think there's enough Canadian. I think the Canadians are a lot more up to speed on um, the current administration in the U.S. than you guys are of us, right? Because, in particular, because of his comments about our sovereignty, which really didn't go down so well. So there's that piece, and I think that as a result, people looked a lot more closely to see, what percentage of the population actually, is aligned with that. And it's, if 30% of the population actually voted that way, it doesn't mean that 30% of the population actually believes in what he's doing, right? So to our earlier conversation around, you may be a Republican, because your family's been a Republican since the dawn of time, and you automatically vote that way, but then you're kind of looking around going, well, I voted for him because I'm a Republican, and also because he said he was going to, stop the, the illegal immigration, and wow, I'm getting all this
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of reports right now of
buyer's
folks
remorse,
who voted and said this is not what I voted for,
right?
right? Whether they're farmers and they can't staff their farm and they can't harvest their
The
crops.
bourbon industry, like holy cow, they're just being slaughtered,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, yeah, and the exports for bourbon, things like that, due to the boycotts, the fact that the Doge department with Elon is going and cutting all these subsidies. Well, guess what? So many people are living off these subsidies, and it's not just
Hello,
some welfare society out there, but it's farmers that are living off these subsidies. It's
yep,
manufacturers that are living off these subsidies. I mean, crap, Elon's got a ton of government contracts, right? And so
go
when they cut,
figure.
you know what I mean? Go figure. And when they cut these things, you just don't know the secondary and third order effects of it. And people are saying this isn't what I voted for. And so, it's ironic because what you're saying is one of the silver linings here is that this administration here has brought Canada together. Well, I feel like in some ways it might actually bring America together too,
Right?
because he's so far to the right. Some of the stuff he's doing is so off off the board that you can't help but be to the left of it.
And
And I'm
this is a
hoping for
conversation
that.
I've been having a lot over the last month, right? Where it's about talking about the tariffs and the payback versus working with the administration. There's no working with this administration, because no matter what you give him, he's going to change gears, right? And if you acquiesce at all, he's just going to take more and take more and take more. So there's really no point in that. And the only way I think that, being frank, that I think a lot of Canadians feel America will take action against this administration is if we continue to push hard and frankly build that wall, right? So
Like physical wall or
No, no, no.
policy
Well,
wall?
no, but we're talking about sending the geese and the beavers down there and getting a nice line because that'll work,
Hey,
right?
beavers can build a well. Yeah, you can't
Oh,
mess with a
and
beaver, man.
geese are nasty, right? Holy cow. No, but just, the logic of Canada basically turning its back on the US from a trade perspective as much as possible. Right? You can't completely disentangle, obviously, because the auto industry and the steel industry and on and on and on, but you can immediately start pivoting and start working elsewhere. I saw somebody else talking about, Jackson, I think, was bringing the point up about Carney's ambitious housing plan. Yeah, I think that's pretty pie in the sky.
Tell us what that means. Give us
Sure. So,
a background.
yeah. So, one of the things that went very sideways under Trudeau was, I'll call it unchecked immigration, right? So, we had, particularly with international students, we had numbers rising and rising and rising, far too high. And there's a lot of backstory on this. And effectively, the system with the universities became so dependent on international students that it became sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. So unless you kind of reeled it in, it would naturally grow. And there's other issues with the provinces, et cetera. But the problem with that was, with that growth in that non-permanent resident population, you now have an increased pressure on housing, right? You also have an increased pressure on healthcare, right? You have those secondary issues which became quite acute. So, housing prices and rent prices started doing this. So now what, Carney is talking about is addressing the housing issue by the government taking a very active role in driving build. So he's talking about building 500,000 houses, and I'm not sure what the window is, but I'm presuming over the course of a couple of years to help bring the price, basically flood the market, right? But the government taking a very active role in doing that, kind of as the same way that it did, I think, after the Second World War, where they just build all these smaller houses to help accommodate growth, right? Because Canada still does need to grow to build a tax base like pretty much every other country, right? Immigration is the way to do that. So you got to fix the housing.
Well, you guys have the lumber for it. I mean, that's one of the things we're going to run into.
But we don't have the
have
trades.
so much. What's that?
But we don't have the trades, right? We don't have enough of the trades.
Well, nobody does. But I mean, I'll tell you what, if we close our border here, granted, you can't walk across, but if you can get people from the southern border of the United States to the northern border of Canada, you can access the hardest working, most reliable workforce of skilled tradesmen in this hemisphere, in my opinion. And we've cut ourselves off we cut our nose off to spite our face. This country was literally built by immigrants, voluntary and otherwise.
Yep.
And to deny that history is to do ourselves a huge disrespect and disservice. And to think that we can continue making America great again without the hands that built it in the first place is it's beyond me. So being in Texas here, we enjoy access to high quality, inexpensive labor here. But that is slowly starting to dry up. I was getting my trees cut last week, and Felipe was our guy that always did our trees and our big landscaping projects. And I go out front and I got a big, I got a check for several $100s for, Felipe. And I'm like, ¿Dónde está Felipe? And they're like, oh, Felipe in Mexico, right? And I'm like, well, ¿por qué, right? And they didn't want to talk about it. But it's like, Felipe went back home, man, you know? And like, and his crew's still here. But like, I mean,
Right
slowly
now.
over time, yeah, right now, exactly.
Yeah.
Right, until maybe they start making more north of the border, or the work dries up here, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so we have this phenomenal base that we've built up of labor that we're systematically dismantling right now with nothing to replace it. Meanwhile, you guys are going to start to really flourish up there, and the demand for this labor is going to just continue to increase. And oh, by the way, you have the raw materials to satisfy it up there. And you're going to be stealing our people. Just like two companies that are side by side on the same block doing the same thing. You're going to be stealing our employees. And and once they go, the toothpaste is out of the tube. And that scares me. And I just it makes me sad.
Well, I think we could take the entire West Coast and make that one nice big province. And that would be a nice pipeline for us to bring all the people straight up.
Now you're going to make us a province over here.
Yeah.
You're stealing our lines here, man.
Ah, come on.
Do you think? Let me ask you. I mean, we've
Yep.
heard a lot of rhetoric in the election and everything around. We're not going to be the 51st state and this
Except
type
here
of
in
stuff.
Alberta.
Do you is that do people believe that an honest intent of this administration is to annex Canada?
Yes.
Yeah.
Our prime
I mean,
minister
here it's
certainly
so
does. I
yeah.
certainly do. Everybody
Yeah.
in my circuit certainly does. And, it's very weird living where I do, because I'm in Alberta, which is, basically Canada's Texas. And, we have a government that has probably got more in common with your current administration than with anything else in Canada. Right. And frankly, can't wait to see the back of her personally, but she has quite a bit of support here. And this province has historically been very conservative, and there is a very definite movement in Alberta. It's a subset, but there's still a subset of people here that think we would be much better off if we were part of the U.S. And they're just talking about our province, right? We just take all of our oil, connect the dots, and off we go. It's not that simple because since Quebec worked hard to try and leave Canada, there's been changes made to how that process works. So it would be very difficult for them to do it. But the point is, there are some people here that are aligned and that are kind of a pipeline between your administration and the Canadian people and the Canadian government, right? So there's an issue. And there's certainly, most people I know are just adamantly opposed to any conversation about it whatsoever.
Well, it seems from where I sit, it seems kind of ridiculous, right? Kind of absurd. I mean, I put it beyond even the whole Greenland talks, right? Like, it's really absurd. But at the same point, I mean, to your point earlier, this is how these things start, right? With rhetoric and feeling things out, and like, oh, what if we just took Poland over? What if we just took Ukraine over? What if we just, it's like, I mean, and I shudder to even think about that. But
the belief is that, the language your administration has used is that, they don't need anything. They're just going to break us. Right. They're economically going to break us.
Through trade embargoes.
Yeah. The tariffs are going to kill us. Right. Well, and Carney's kind of going, well, not so much, buddy. Right. We're going to just turn our backs on you. We're going to go this way. And it's not that easy. It's going to be very difficult to replace all the business, and we won't replace all of it. But certainly moves are going to happen to deflect those goods elsewhere. Right? But there is a very real concern that, Trump's agenda is very much to gain access to Canadian resources and land, et cetera, right?
Yeah, Rick says we take him serious because he is so incredibly unpredictable. He is unpredictable, and the funny thing is he says wild and crazy stuff, and then he actually tries to execute on it, which is
or he just does.
Yeah, for a long time, people would say, "Oh, he doesn't actually mean that. Oh, he's just kidding." And then he gets in office and he starts doing it, and you're like, "Are you serious right now? Like, you can't do that." Richard says I have a pretty. Let's see, hold on a second. We're going to keep that going. Farrell says, this is so interesting to get your perspective, Ken. Please know that I think the majority of Americans do not share the view of the administration in regards to annexing Canada. Chaos. Yeah.
But you're not, with all due respect, Farrell, you're not in charge, right?
Yeah. Well, and we don't want your football teams either. So
no, they suck.
I'm just kidding.
Or hockey kicks your butt on a regular basis.
That's fair. That's
Four Nations, right? Like, you guys couldn't do so well.
Let's see here. Richard's got a question here.
Sure.
Get in the comments here. Hit these like buttons, y'all. He says, I have a pretty basic, naive question because I really don't follow politics. What is motivating Trump? Would he want to achieve good for the U.S. if it meant a personal sacrifice? Is he really motivated by greatness for the U.S. or something else? Do you want to answer that, and then I'll take a swing?
Yeah, I don't think Trump's in it for anybody other than Trump. Right? Personally, I don't think the American people actually factor in whatsoever, and that's with all due respect to the people that follow and vote him. The very people that are his hard base are the ones he's hurting most. Look at Arkansas, right? Like, this is not about the American people. This is about Trump's agenda. Yeah. First, he gets elected, it keeps him out of jail. That's a good start.
You're 100% right. Nobody talks about that. He gets
I
elected
do.
and then and then changes the law to say a president cannot be cannot be convicted of a
And
crime or
all the
something,
Jan 6 guys were all of a sudden pardoned.
and all pardoned.
What up with that, right? You want to talk
And
about gangs?
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Oh my gosh, I couldn't. I have no difference of opinion than Ken. He nailed it. I mean, Trump is purely out for himself, and everyone else is really just a bargaining chip
Yep.
in that play. And it's so obvious too. I mean, to the point where and I don't want to make this all about Trump, but to the point where he's issued his own Trump coin now, and people can buy, quote unquote, buy his cryptocurrency, which is really to make a direct contribution to him, and that's just insane to me. He's like publicly on the take. He's basically got a GoFundMe account, for millions of dollars, billions of dollars. I'm going to keep it moving here because
Yeah, sure.
I think we all agree. Somebody says, I would agree that the redirection of resources between provinces could actually help speed up the housing strategy. I think that
Yep.
immigration will be more targeted on specific occupations
Yes.
that are needed that cannot be covered from within the trades. Anthony Waddell says, what do you think about this? You know, here in the United States, we have two kinds of immigration. Well, we have several, but we call it skilled,
Yep.
skilled and unskilled labor, right? For lack of a better term. Do you think that how do you think the growth in these different types of immigration will occur?
Okay, well, let's just touch on one thing. There was a question about, or an aspect of this that was provincial trade barriers, which I don't think you guys have. So one of the things that we're doing, aside from just looking at other markets, is also reducing trade barriers internally so we can move more goods and services across Canada. That also means accreditations Canada-wide for things like healthcare and also for trades to make it easier for people to have talent mobility within the country. So there's that piece. In terms of bringing in skilled workers, yes, Carney's already talked about the global skills strategy and targeting very specific high skilled workers and likely amending that program to target in-demand skills, right? So there's a short-term component, but then there's also a longer-term component because under our permanent residence program, there is a category called there's a stream called category-based selection, which allows the government to identify specific job families and say that, all right, we're going to target draws for individuals that want to be PRs that are in these skill sets because Canada needs them, right? They've done that in the past primarily for IT. There's no reason why they couldn't be doing it for the trades. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that. So immigration is going to be, a lot less blunt instrument and a lot more surgical.
Yeah, I didn't realize that's super interesting. I didn't realize about the inter-province trade barriers.
Yeah, because you guys don't have that, do you?
We abolished like the Interstate Commerce Commission back in the 90s, where like for trucking, for instance, and transportation,
Right.
you had to have authority to move on a state by state basis. Whereas now you have interstate authority across the contiguous 48 states, and you can freely go back and forth. Now, I'm also not sure of any duties or tariffs that exist inside of states. And the same thing with immigration, right? Like I can move from Michigan to Texas to Florida to New York to, and I have, right? And I've crossed a lot of borders, quote unquote, where I've been taxed differently based on my residency. And I've even had to pay to register cars. And I mean, there are definite tax differences, but I've never had to apply for residency in these different states, which I find interesting. I find it interesting to think why countries couldn't adopt that model. What would happen? Like, what would be the?
I'm not sure where you're going with that.
Well, I don't know
in
where
Canada,
I'm going with it.
Because in Canada, immigration is broadly federal, right? So,
Yeah.
If you get permanent residence for Canada, you're able to live where you want, unless you're going in through a very specific program, whether like a provincial program, which requires you, for a period of time at least, anyways, to reside in that province.
Well, this is it's a crazy notion, right? But what I'm saying is, if I can move around the United States and across a lot of state borders, and they all have different tax codes here in the United States, what would happen if we did that in the world?
Well, that's Europe to a certain degree, right? Because there's quite a bit of
the EU.
Yeah, I mean, there's within the Schengen, there's quite a bit of mobility, and I think there's, within limits, and there's the posted worker restrictions and all those other elements. But I do, one of the things that I think is very much probably under discussion is as we look to diversify our trade with the EU and with the UK, and if they join the entirety of it, I think you probably will see also a harder look at the free trade agreements, which also include immigration, right? So we may see easier immigration between various countries, and why not, right? Europe has a lot of people, and why wouldn't we, look to that as a source, right? And certainly, I know Carney is very much targeting your country for your skilled people, and he's going to be very opportunistic about it. So.
Yeah, it seems like I could see a lot of people wanting to move to Canada. I mean,
Yeah,
U.S. born folks want to move to Canada. What's the opportunity for U.S. born folks who want to move to Canada? I mean,
it's
after
tough.
every major election, people say, "Oh, God, I'm going to Canada." Like no, most people don't, but like if they wanted to, what would that be like?
Yeah, it's tougher, right? Because typically the people that are talking that way tend to be older, and our system does not favor that, right? So when we were talking earlier, I mentioned cases where we've got senior executives that are got they work for a company in the U.S. Maybe they've got an office here in Canada. Then it's easy enough to transfer them here, and once they worked here for a period of time, there's usually opportunities for them to get permanent residence. So it's easier for those folks. Just for the average American that wants to come to Canada, it's tough. And we've tightened up our immigration program, and right now the scores to be able to be successful with our express entry program are very high, right? Unless you meet very specific criteria. So if you really want to come in, learn French really quick, because that's
The
a
way.
gold card right now. Yeah.
That's interesting. Um, Samara, our producer here wants to know
Mhm.
what is the this is a broad question. What does the future hold, in your opinion, for U.S. Canada relations?
Well, it's funny, I know Roman's listening, and he and I talk a lot and have for several years. And his hope is very much that relationships kind of go back to normal once your administration kind of settles down. I don't think so, and he and I disagree with that. He just believes that there's so much goodwill between the people. The problem is your government has damaged a relationship that has existed for decades and decades. I mean, our soldiers fought side by side with yours, died to protect the very freedoms that I think your current administration is tearing down. And Canadians look at that and just go, like, really? You're turning your back on us, of all people? We're the
Yeah.
enemy somehow? How are you possibly talking in these terms? And I don't think that sense of betrayal, and it's very much that, is going to go away, right? I think you're going to get to a point with our current government under Carney where he's going to be negotiating, better long-term deals. And it just makes me laugh because, Trump is looking for a better deal, and he's the one that negotiated the last one, right? And it was fundamentally no different than the one before it. He was just claiming it was all this wondrous stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, he made everybody re-sign up for free trade. It's like, what do you
And
mean
renamed
re-sign
it.
up?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're going to call it USMCA. Well, no, we're going to call it Kuzma. Oh well. But I don't think you're going to find that trust is going to come back very easily. If he disappears and all of a sudden your institutions come back and all of a sudden you start acting like a trusting neighbor, I think it's kind of like, I'm sure it's like, any couple where there's a betrayal in the relationship, that trust really doesn't come back very easily. It takes a lot of years to overcome that. And there's always that little niggling thing going, are they going to cheat again? What's the story,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, I could see with a new president and a regime change and everything, and a lot of fence mending and everything, that we could get back on track, because it's in both of our interests to be
Oh,
good
sure it is.
partners. And so I think unlike a relationship where you're still both people are still the same, when you change a person out, maybe it's a little different. But yeah, I hope you know what I hate? I hate the fact that we're taking a 100-day look back on the start of this presidency right now,
Mhm.
and I realized that yesterday there's 365 days in a year, and we've signed up
Mhm.
for 4 of these.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, holy F, that is a lot of years that we have to, we have like 1,200 more days left of
Yeah, and
this.
it's, with all due respect, it's not just you; it's the rest of us in the world, right?
Well, that makes me
And
feel
that's
slightly better. You've heard of Misery Loves Company. I mean, that just makes me
yeah.
feel slightly better.
Well, come up and spend your money up here. We can hang
I
out and
might
talk.
just have to.
Yeah,
Rick makes a good point too, and I'm going to talk about this,
sure.
and then we're going to have some fun. But you guys see behind me, well, normally there's not a bunny, but sometimes there's a bunny. People are asking about the bunny. It's the YouTube TV bunny. I guess they can't sell enough commercials on YouTube TV, even though Google was the only one doing well last quarter. Rick says it's overall market uncertainty. Walmart says they're going to run out of product
Hmm.
within a short time, including toys. Now you're talking clothes and other consumer goods. He says you can come shopping in Canada. Rick, I would ask you why they're going to run out. I think it's tariff related. I think I've also heard some things about, the Chinese shipping lanes
Hmm.
being very down right now and things like that. But I will note that right when we were coming on and I turned on CNBC, the markets right behind me, the Dow was up, the Nasdaq was up, the S&P was up, the Russell 2000 was up. All of the markets here in the States were up, and I think it has something to do with Mark Carney getting elected in Canada. The world craves stability, it craves sensibility, and I'm very hopeful that this is what I've seen as regime change historically has led to dominoes of other poor choices
Hmm.
and choices towards nationalism and choices towards protectionism and isolationism. And I'm hopeful that this guy that you've elected can be a signal change for the rest of the world, and it's just a good example
And
for us.
it's interesting. There was an article that ran on him, and it was talking about his secret power being reasonableness, right? And that's one of the reasons why so many people I think gravitated to him, because he was calm, articulate, very well educated, very skilled, and by contrast, his opponent was literally not. His opponent was very ragey, very shouty, very Trumpian, and frankly, not very well educated, not very experienced. So he brings that kind of optimism about the future. He also brings that series of connections around the world to be able to further an agenda that would take us away and more securely from the U.S. It was funny, this morning I had a note come in very early. Nice to see that you're still our sane neighbor, right? So again, to your point, creating a bit of an example, and also the realization that it doesn't have to be like what you're experiencing, and we can help be that agent. But I think, unfortunately, we're going to be that agent by forcing a bit more pain on the American people through the tariff programs, so that it forces you guys to act, right? Because we kind of look at you guys going, how come no one's doing anything? Why isn't anybody stopping this? And it's just
Yeah,
not happening, right? So yay midterms. Well, that's a long ways away, kids, right? Like,
yeah. It is a long way away, and it's, for us, it's just the Congress, and that is not shown. I mean, frankly, what Congress wants has very little to do with the executive orders that are being passed
right.
and things that are getting ramrodded through. So it's really interesting. Rob Zeitz putting in here a 35% projected decrease in shipping versus this time last year coming through the port of Los Angeles, Long Beach, which is the largest, at least the largest West Coast port, if not the largest port in
Mm.
the United States, probably North America. Very interesting, Rob. Very interesting. That's all. This is all really sad. Well, good for you guys. Sad for us. Sad for all of us, macro. But you know what? Let's have a little fun, Ken.
Sure.
What do you say, huh? Let's
I've
have a
been
little
having a lot of fun personally, but I could talk about this stuff all
little
day long.
neighborly fun. Okay.
Sure.
All
Fire
right.
away.
Let's do it. We're gonna play a game called Overrated, Underrated. You wanna play with me?
Okay.
All right.
Is it going to be
Wonderful.
hard?
Well, do you know how to play?
I don't know how to play.
Okay.
Tell me how to
Good.
play.
I will tell you. You're very smart. I will tell you
I'll
how
try.
to play. There's only two things you have to know. One, I
Okay.
will give you a topic, and you will tell me if it is either overrated or underrated.
Sure.
Okay. Secondly, I will tell you if you are right.
But that's an opinion. How can it be right or
It's
wrong?
very American. Okay.
Okay. Right.
It's my way or the highway. Just kidding. Sorry, too soon. All right, overrated, underrated. Let's have some fun. First one up, Canadian Football League.
Overrated. Yeah, we have the worst team in the league here in this town, and that's just sad.
Oh, who's your team?
Well, it used to be the Edmonton Eskimos. Now it's the Edmonton Elks because God forbid we call them Eskimos because that's just not PC.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
but you know that's
I'm sad you put all those Eskimos out of work.
oh,
I think, I mean, those Elks have been doing just fine for too long.
I like
Free
Elks.
reign.
It's a good
Yeah.
logo. Bad
Yeah,
team.
I bet. Yeah, I'm gonna say overrated.
Mm-hmm.
Well, gosh, I don't know if it can be overrated from my perspective because we don't even think about the Canadian Football League here.
Why would
So
you?
I'm gonna say it's underrated. I'm gonna go underrated
Oh,
just
well,
because
I guess.
I couldn't name. I know you have the Argonauts. Is that a thing?
Yep. Toronto
Huguenots,
Argonauts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a Calgary Stampede? Is that a thing?
Calgary Stampeders. Yep.
Oh,
Yeah,
geez.
they're not a bad squad. You know,
Okay.
it's a different game though, right?
I would like to check it. You've got the Rouge. You've got onside punts. What's an onside punt?
Honestly, I'm a football guy, and as much as I like to go to a game once a year and drink beer, but that's about it. I'm not a big follower. Hockey, I can talk about, sort of.
I hear that. And do you guys play? Is it a summer sport up there?
Well, kind of, because it gets minus 40 here, right?
Yeah, I bet that's lovely. I'd
Yeah.
like to go see a football game. All right, let's. Shadur Sanders might become an Argonaut. That's funny. Our football is bigger. Hey, listen, it's not about size, Rick.
Go, Rick,
Jeez.
go.
Look at how fast you guys take on our American politics.
Oh.
Saskatchewan Roughriders, very good. All right, let's keep it moving here. Next one up, the Edmonton Oilers.
That's I mean, personally, I think they're a fantastic team. So does that make them underrated, or that's probably underrated for me? I think they're.
I think you're right. I think they are underrated. You look at the rich history of the Edmonton Oilers and the phenomenal people that have played in Edmonton.
Buddy, I was there very beginning. I got to see Gretz play in like the early games of the Oilers. So yeah, they're
Gretzky,
honestly,
Messi. I mean,
Messier,
I mean, honestly,
Messier. Yeah, we've got McJesus now, Draisaitl. We've got a game tonight. It's going to be unholy good, right? So
yeah, I love it. It. All right, yep, you're right. There you go. Underrated. Next one up. Overrated, underrated. Donald Trump. Oh, jeez.
This doesn't even belong in the list, right? My opinion of this particular gentleman is not really something I would want to comment on. So is he overrated? Yes. Decided who rates him positively? How can you positively?
I didn't know you could call rapists gentlemen.
Ooh, right? Yeah.
Anyway, who's counting? All right, you get credit on that. You get extra credit on that one. All right, next one up. Overrated, underrated. Alberta.
I'll say it's underrated, and the reason I say that is because it's really an amazing province. We're just, in my opinion, suffering under miserable leadership, right? So, it's kind of like giving a Ferrari to somebody with, a learner. So you just, what are you doing? Take the keys away from this person, let them move to Mar-a-Lago and settle in. And just, leave the province to the adults, please.
You can't export your bad politicians to us here.
Oh, yes, I can. Yeah, I can she comes down by herself all the time. She was on Breitbart talking up how great,
gosh.
Yeah, okay. Anyways.
Oh my God. Is that because your province is kind of more like, you're kind of like our Midwest, like our middle of the country kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got, Alberta is 2 major cities, right? 2 urbans. The rest is rural. It's farmland. It's ranching. It's mountains.
Right.
And the rurals vote hardcore conservative and have forever. And the cities, provincially tend to flip back and forth. But this was pretty much a blue sweep, right? So blue being conservative here. So yeah, it's an interesting place.
The rest of Canada certainly sees Albertans as overrated and entitled.
Yeah, damn right, Rick. And that's, So there's some history here. So Rick is actually from the same city. So he's lived and breathed our culture, and he's taking a sabbatical from it. But Canada, the rest of Canada just looks at us as a bunch of whiny babies and don't understand the Western alienation. And frankly, nor do I. I live here. I grew up here. I've been living here my whole life. So, no offense, folks, but if you can afford, $1 million house and an $80,000 truck, you're not doing so bad. Stop complaining so much. But that's
I hear that. It's always the rich people that complain the most. You notice that? Poor
yeah,
people are the happiest people. Rich people complain all the time.
yeah. Well, go figure.
Anyway, love
Yeah.
it.
What's next?
What do we got? How many we got left? One left. Last one up here, Ken.
Yep.
Overrated, underrated, poutine.
Ooh, underrated. Yeah, I'm a believer. It's
I'm a
it's hard to
believer.
pack in a bowl, and I've got my own particular fave. So mine is like old school traditional, but with chopped pickled jalapenos on top, and I'm golden. But I have it like, maybe once, maybe twice a year. And so I was living in the mountains in Canmore for almost 9 years. We moved to the city just to be close to family. But when we were living in Canmore, there was a place that was far too close in walking distance from our house that did proper Quebec style poutine, and it was happiness. I had to sneak there so my wife didn't know I was going, but it was brilliant stuff. But yeah,
At least you're
underrated.
sneaking around on your wife eating French fries. I mean,
Yeah,
it could be worse, right?
could be a lot worse. Yeah,
Poutine, though, I got a question for you.
yeah.
I enjoy fries. I enjoy cheese. I enjoy cheese fries. But I always have and I enjoy gravy. But the cheese
And you like
kind
chili?
of,
You like chili
yeah,
cheese fries, right? Come on.
yeah, I'll eat all. Yeah, sure, as long as
Yeah,
there's no
okay.
beans in the chili. But
All right.
here's the thing, poutine, doesn't the
Excellent.
cheese start to like kind of clump together, and when it cools, it's kind of clumps. We almost need to like do a queso where we can kind of keep it creamy, you know?
Well, yeah, and I actually do that, but we use cheese curds, right? And they hold a bit better. And the reality is, it doesn't last long enough to congeal, so you're just like whaling it back. Because this poutine is like our, 2 in the morning from the bar food.
Yeah. Well, I do like 2 in the morning bar runs. All right, Ken, this is a lot of fun. I know you're a busy guy. You've got
Yeah,
a lot of work to do, I'm sure, today.
day job.
Clients calling you out the wazoo, I'm sure. I want to just ask you, do you want to leave us maybe with just a final thought before we sign off here today?
Yeah, if I was going to leave you with anything, I'd want, the Americans in the audience in particular, to realize this is really not about you as a people. This is really about your administration, right? Do something to fix that, because there's no reason for what any of us are going through. It's literally that one guy, and well, I'd say it's just one guy, but it's the whole machine behind him, right? And y'all got to fix that, because that's a problem that ain't going to go away. If you don't do something to fix it sooner rather than later, it's going to entrench itself, right? So,
yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it, Ken. Thanks for making the time here. I know you're
yeah, great.
busy, and congratulations on the Prime Minister. And we're rooting for you down here.
All right. Well, hoping all the best for you guys as well. Thanks for the time,
Yeah.
Ben. Really appreciate it. Good to see you again.
Thank you too. Take care,
Okay.
everybody.
Take
We will
care.
see you tomorrow, same time.